In this video, we're going to go over common challenges that can make sentence completion questions trickier than they look. For a detailed walkthrough on how to solve both single blank and double blank sentence completion questions, be sure to watch our earlier video on that topic. A link is included in this video's description. While that video focused on taking you step by step through the solving process, this video will touch upon common challenges you may come across when solving single and double blank questions. We'll cover related or close enough options, less familiar synonyms, homographs and homophones, word hierarchy, prefixes and suffixes, sentence structure signals, including conjunctions and prepositions, and a common double blank trap. Let's get right into it. We'll begin with related or close enough options. Sometimes you'll see an answer choice that's clearly connected to the topic of the sentence, and it feels tempting to choose it just because it fits the general subject matter. But a word being related to the topic is not the same as a word fitting the blank. In fact, sometimes the test will intentionally use a word that's related to the topic of the sentence in an attempt to confuse you. The missing word needs to create a very specific meaning in context. Let's look at an example. The company introduced a new policy to address ongoing blank in workplace communication. A. Emails. B. Bureaucracy. C. Misunderstandings, or D. Departments. At first glance, several of these choices seem related to workplace communication. Emails and departments are part of how communication happens in a company, and bureaucracy is commonly associated with workplace policies, which can make it feel tempting. But the sentence isn't asking what exists in a company, it's asking what problem the new policy is meant to address. If there's a new policy to address company communication, we're looking for some sort of issue or breakdown in communication that necessitated a policy being made. Out of our choices, only misunderstandings clearly names an issue in communication. The other choices are related to the topic, but they don't answer the question the sentence is asking. Next, we have less familiar or less immediate synonyms. When you fill in a blank with your own word, you'll usually think of a common, everyday word, and that's exactly what you should do. But the correct answer choice may be a synonym that's less familiar or less immediate. For example, the manager delivered blank criticism, pointing out several flaws in the proposal. A. Mild, B. Casual, C. Scathing, or D. Hesitant. You might fill in the blank with harsh or strong criticism. If you're only looking for that exact word, however, none of the choices may jump out at you right away. But scathing creates the same meaning as harsh criticism, even though it's not as commonly used. This is why it's important to focus on meaning, not on whether the word is the one you personally would have chosen. Our placeholder words are meant to be just that, placeholders, until we can land on our final answer. Next, we have homographs. Homographs are words that are spelled the same but have different meanings and often different pronunciations. The meaning of the word depends entirely on how it's being used in the sentence. It's important to keep an open mind and not lock in on any one pronunciation or definition too quickly. For example, the word close can be pronounced close and mean near, or close and mean to shut. The word tear can mean a tear that falls from your eye, or a tear, or a rip. The word bow can either mean to bow, to bend at the waist, a bow, a decorative knot, or a bow and arrow. When homographs appear as an answer choice, take a moment to think through their different pronunciations and meanings before marking them off. The correct definition may not be the one that comes to mind first. A similar kind of trap involves homophones, or words that are pronounced the same but spelled differently. Some answer choices may sound like a word you're expecting or look very similar to it, even though they don't mean the same thing. For example, the professor asked the students to blank a clear written response to the prompt. A. Write, B. Compose, C. Lengthen, or D. Teach. In this question, the trap comes from how the word sounds. When you read the sentence, you may naturally hear the word write in your head, which makes choice A, RIGHT, tempting at first glance. The professor asked the students to write a response. But even though RIGHT sounds the same as WRITE, the word that would fit this blank, it has a completely different meaning and doesn't fit the sentence. RIGHT means directionally to the right, or correct, while WRITE means to compose. The sentence is asking for a word that means to create or write a response. and compose fits this blank precisely. Lengthen and teach don't describe producing the response itself, so they can be marked off. This is a good reminder to slow down when an answer looks or sounds similar and make sure the meaning actually works in context. Next, let's move on to word hierarchy, specifically hypernyms and hyponyms. A hypernym is a word with a broad meaning that includes more specific words under it. For example, color is a hypernym of red, blue, or purple. And within those colors, we can break it down even further. Red is a hypernym of scarlet, crimson, and ruby. Blue is a hypernym for navy, cobalt, and azure. And purple is a hypernym for lavender, lilac, and violet. A hyponym is the opposite, a more specific word that falls under a broader category. For example, Labrador is a hyponym for dog, and dog is a hyponym for animal. Apple is a hyponym for fruit, and fruit is a hyponym for food. With sentence completion questions, this means the correct answer may be more general or more specific than the word you initially had in mind. For example, the museum acquired a rare historical blank from the Renaissance period. A. Concept, B. Institution, C. Artifact, or D. Regulation. When reading this sentence, you may naturally fill in the blank with a specific word like painting or sculpture. That's a reasonable starting point, but the exact word you come up with doesn't need to appear in the answer choices for the correct answer to be there. Choice C, artifact, is a broader category that includes paintings, sculptures, and other physical objects from a historical period. Meaning, in this context, it's a hypernym of painting or sculpture. The other choices don't describe something a museum would acquire as a physical historical object. This is a good example of why you shouldn't eliminate an answer just because it's more general or more specific than the word you had in mind. As long as it matches the meaning the sentence is asking for, it can still be correct. Next, we have prefixes and suffixes. Prefixes and suffixes may completely change the meaning of a root word. Sometimes you recognize the root word and assume the word means what you think it means, but the prefix or suffix can change everything. There are many examples of prefixes that, when added to a root word, will change its meaning to the opposite. Here are some common examples you may see. In. This prefix turns effective into ineffective, dependent into independent, and formal into informal. Il turns logical into illogical, legal into illegal, and legible into illegible. Dis turns approve into disapprove, appear into disappear, and connect into disconnect. And IR turns responsible into irresponsible, relevant into irrelevant, and regular into irregular. With suffixes, while it isn't as common to have a suffix that will change the root word's meaning to its opposite, there is one common suffix you will likely come across. LESS turns use into useless, care into careless, and hope into hopeless. On sentence completion questions, you may be rushing and see an answer choice that looks correct because you recognize the root word. Always take a moment to check how the prefix or suffix affects the word's meaning before selecting it. Next, we have sentence structure challenges. Sometimes the difficulty isn't the vocabulary, it's the way the sentence is built. A longer sentence, or one with more than one clause, can quickly become confusing, especially when missing a word or two. Conjunctions and prepositions often tell you how ideas relate to each other, and they can help narrow down what the word in the blank is meant to convey. Let's take a look at an example with a conjunction. Blank the plan appeared effective at first, it ultimately failed to address the core problem. A. Because, B. Although, C. Unless, or D. When. Here, the key to the sentence is the relationship between the two clauses. The second clause tells us that the plan ultimately failed, which contrasts with the idea that it appeared effective at first. This contrast shows us we're looking for a word that signals opposition between the clauses. Although establishes that contrast clearly. Because sets up a cause and effect relationship, which doesn't fit here. Unless introduces a condition, which the sentence isn't expressing. When describes timing, not contrast, and the sentence isn't talking about when the plan failed. It's comparing expectation with outcome. Paying attention to conjunctions like this can quickly narrow down your options before you even look closely at the rest of the sentence. Let's take a look at another example, this time where the preposition shapes the relationship. The researcher collected additional data during the blank phase of the experiment. A. Analysis, B. Planning, C. Revision, or D. Publication. In this sentence, the preposition during tells us we're looking for a phase that overlaps in time with data collection. Planning happens before data is collected, and revision and publication happen after the research is essentially complete. Only analysis naturally occurs at the same time additional data might be gathered. This is a good reminder that prepositions can help define relationships in a sentence, and noticing them can help you rule out choices that don't fit that relationship. Finally, there's a very specific trap that appears in double blank questions: switched word order. Sometimes an answer choice includes two words that both belong in the sentence, but they're placed in the wrong blanks. The first word fits the second blank, and the second word fits the first blank. For example, the meeting began blank, but gradually became blank as more issues were introduced. A. Focused, chaotic. B. Chaotic, focused. C. Brief, productive. Or D. Formal, efficient. In this sentence, both focused and chaotic clearly belong somewhere. We can see that the meeting starts one way and ends a totally different way. And as focused and chaotic are opposite sides of a coin, we can see they both fit. And as we see that more issues were introduced as they went along, that means we need focused in the first blank and chaotic in the second, which we see is choice A. Choice B contains the same two strong words, but in the wrong order. If you're wondering if the test made a mistake, rest assured it did not. It's checking whether you're paying attention to where each word belongs, so make sure you are. And with that, we've covered the most common challenges that can make sentence completion questions tricky. We looked at close enough options, less immediate synonyms, homographs and homophones, word hierarchy, prefixes and suffixes, sentence structure signals, including conjunctions and prepositions, and a double blank trap that can throw you off if you're not paying attention to the relationship between the blanks. Make sure to watch the other videos in the series, and as always, keep practicing.